Well, welcome to Straight Science, everyone. Straight Science is a evening public seminar series put on by University of Alaska Fairbanks Northwest Campus in Nome and University of Alaska Fairbanks, Alaska Sea Grant, also in Nome. And tonight, the Nome Sea Grant office is on the road. We're actually down in Southeast Alaska in Petersburg. So I really should have just hopped over and done this right in Juneau, but we're here in Petersburg. We're very excited. So both Northwest Campus and Alaska Sea Grant are public servants for the Bering Strait region. We serve the Bering Strait region, all peoples, and the Bering Strait region is the homeland and waters of the Yupik, St. Lawrence Island Yupik, and Inupiaq peoples. So tonight, I'm really excited because we've been trying since the whole Ukraine business started in February, and the Coast Guard tonight has given us some time to let us know sort of what's happened and where we're headed. Very important for us. And our speaker tonight is Rear Admiral Nathan Moore. He is the commanding officer of District 17. So District 17 is all of Alaska. And he's been with us since 2021. He is responsible for the U.S. Coast Guard operations throughout Alaska, the North Pacific, the Bering Sea, the Chukchi Sea, the Beaufort Sea, and the Arctic Ocean. So that's quite a bit. And he is responsible for protecting our lives and property, ensuring marine safety, enforcing laws and international treaties. So that means something for us. Protecting the marine environment, preserving living resources, and promoting national security, all super relevant to the Bering Strait region. He has served on the icebreaker, the Polar Star, which we are well versed in. Also the Harriet Lane, a ship called the Venturous. And most recently, and this will make sense because it seems the Stratton is in our waters, he was the commanding officer of the Legend class cutter Stratton. On top of that, Rear Admiral Moore was the assistant commandant for engineering and logistics, responsible for all naval, aeronautical, responsible for 230 ships, 1,800 boats, and 200 aircraft. And to do that, he was executing an annual budget of $1 billion. So we are really grateful that the United States Coast Guard put such a fine and well-rounded, knowledgeable person in charge of Alaska's Coast Guard. So with that, it's a privilege to have you here tonight, and please take it away.
Okay, thanks, Kay. You got with that kind of introduction, I want to meet this guy. Whoever that gets you that excited. So that's really nice of you. Thanks very much. I appreciate it. I'll tell you what. First and foremost, I wanted to mention for folks, in the region that, all of us in the Coast Guard are still thinking about you all and all of you that were impacted by the remnants of Murbach, whatever that was, a month ago or so. And so we think about you. We're working as hard as we can to help you prepare for winter as it's upon us. And our thoughts are certainly still with the folks of the region up there. What I thought I'd do today is talk as much as I can about some current events. We've done some straight science talks before, different Coast Guard representatives, and talked about some really important things, what specifically things that were done about traffic coming through the Bering Strait. We've talked quite a bit about the history of what we've done in the Bering Strait region. But I think today what I do, like I said, is maybe go through some of the more current events, because I know those will be on people's minds. So I want to talk a little bit about our national security oriented work offshore and our efforts to deliver that service to the residents and the waterway users in the region. And when I talk about that national security objectives, let me start by saying that we realize that the waters of the Bering Strait are not only just your backyard, but they're critically important for subsistence activities. I mean, it's your garden. It's also the place that's taken on even more importance in recent years because of the geopolitical competition that is going on there. And much of this is related to the increased interest and presence of the vessels of both Russia and China. So, as most of you know, we've been patrolling the maritime border with Russia with our largest and most capable cutters. Gay mentioned the Stratton, which is up underway right now. The Coast Guard cutter Kimball's been up there. The Coast Guard cutter Midget has been up there this summer. These are all new Legend class national security cutters. We've been doing that with our cutters and aircrafts for the last 4 months, specifically to protect those U.S. sovereign interests. And that's the same as we've done for decades. The benefit now is we've just got newer, better ships to do it with. And those cutters patrol as far south as Kiska, where they intercepted a group of Chinese and Russian warships that were sailing up inside the Aleutian chain, and all the way up north into the Chukchi and Beaufort Seas. So it's quite a distance, obviously quite a range to have to cover, but we've been able to do that with ships rotating through the region this summer. And of course, they patrol specifically in the vicinity of the Bering Strait for a considerable length of time, safeguarding the U.S. fish stocks and from foreign poaching, which has become increasingly important as the fish stocks migrate north due to the warming waters, I should say, and the new commercial fisheries that have commenced in the Arctic. That's on the Russian side of the Chukchi Sea, where the Russians have started to pollock fish up there. So we both engage with and push back against our Russian government counterparts that operate along those borders to promote what is the existing rules-based order. And we clearly and closely monitor the foreign vessel traffic that flows through the region as it's steadily increased from year over year. We've logistically supported the land-based Department of Defense exercises on St. Lawrence Island this summer that I'm sure many of you are familiar with up there as well. So I think it's worth mentioning just quickly a comment or two on the trends that we're seeing on that Bering Sea traffic. We've observed since the start of the Ukraine war, so going back, late winter, early spring, that the traffic through the Bering Strait on the Russian side has actually diminished from trends in recent years, which in general has showed traffic growing, but it has not, again, since the Ukraine invasion. So it's been widely reported that nations other than Russia have elected to stay away from shipping through the Northern Sea route due to the conflict. And so we're seeing that as potentially a reason for that decreased traffic. I'll note that the traffic is completely legal as long as it complies with international law, and those core shipments of LNG that originated from the Arctic Russian ports of Asia have continued. Those have continued unabated. Traffic on the U.S. side of the border is essentially unchanged from recent years, and again, we haven't seen any real difference in that this summer as a result of the Ukraine situation. So I am happy to answer questions on any of that. As far as the border crossings go, I'm sure everyone here is aware that the notable case back on October 4th on St. Lawrence, where we were notified by local officials in Gamble that 2 Russian nationals landed at the beach near the village. They arrived in a small personal craft and were taken to the local public safety facility for holding until the federal authorities arrived. We supported the Customs and Border Patrol agents by flying in. We actually flew their agents in and out with the persons that were the actual the folks that landed. So we provided the transportation with Coast Guard C-130 there, took those folks and the agents to Anchorage for further disposition and processing. So we also answered questions that had been posed by our regional Russian counterparts over this border-related case. From a border perspective, the Border Patrol is the lead agency, of course, but I look at that case kind of from a search and rescue perspective, right? As the Coast Guard Admiral, we think about things on the water in terms of safety of life at sea. And at the time of the incident, we actually flew a C-130 over the waters of the area, up and down the border, north-south, to ensure that we weren't seeing other vessels trying to make the same voyage. And again, from a safety perspective, looking out for safety of life at sea. So this was certainly a unique case that I hope is not repeated from a safety standpoint, but we'll be ready to fly and prosecute search and rescue missions as we always are and support CBP any way we can. Hey, speaking of search and rescue, we had 20 different SAR cases that ran out of Kotzebue this year. Most of you probably know we have our seasonal forward operating location there with 2 H-60s based there for over 4 months. So we had 20 cases, saving 26 lives. That's our most important mission in the region, and one that we invest a great deal of resources to accomplish. In fact, just last Friday, we launched a helicopter to Little Diomede to take a 12-month-old infant to higher medical care in Nome, and we were actually in the process of demobilizing our seasonal base in Kotzebue when that case came in, or came up, when the need for that came up. So it required us to load up a fresh helicopter crew in a C-130 from Kodiak, fly the second crew up to relieve the crew that was off going from Kotzebue, and be able to do all of that and fly cover to get out to Diomede and help get that child, save that child's life, get that child back to higher level care. So tremendous success from the Kodiak crews and the entire Coast Guard at large. So when they're not flying SAR up there in Kodiak, they support a great deal of marine mammal research by different organizations. We're happy to provide that logistical lift for researchers and other folks in the area that would otherwise not be possible. So I mentioned Typhoon Murmok, just to circle back to that for a second. In response to that remarkable storm that impacted Western Alaska, and as you all know, from Bristol Bay up through Nome, we stood up what we call an incident command to organize our efforts, run out of sector Anchorage. And we had emergency response teams out in 32 communities to conduct damage assessments in bulk oil facilities, and conduct overflights of communities and shorelines looking for any sheens or pollution after the storm. We also provided out of Anchorage subject matter expertise, coordination, and logistics support to FEMA and to the state of Alaska as a team effort. So I'm happy to report that while there was significant and lasting damage to those communities, there were no large oil spills to threaten food security, and no search and rescue cases as a result of the storm. So that's a fantastic situation at the end of the day. I wanted to mention mass rescue for a couple moments. We actually did a tabletop exercise up in Uktiavik in August that was focused on what we would call the land-based portion of a vessel mass rescue incident. And that's one of the things I'm most worried about, to be honest with you. This would be something like a cruise ship, for example, that caught on fire off the North Slope and had hundreds of passengers that needed to get off or got out into life rafts, and we had to rescue them. Certainly the infrastructure doesn't support that many people coming ashore at one time. Depending on the time of year, we may or may not have helicopter assets on scene to support it. So exercising that response is really important to us as we work with our local and state partners there in the region, and to engage both across the spectrum of the entire emergency management organization to make sure that we're ready. In terms of oil spill preparedness, last summer, really just over a year ago, I guess, we did some really tremendous oil spill preparedness and response training, some of which I think was mentioned by Commander Altendorf in the previous Strait Science talk back, whatever that was, a month or two ago. But just most recently, in July, Sector Anchorage conducted oil spill preparedness and response training at the Bethel Crowley facility that included industry representatives, the Bethel Search and Rescue, Bethel City and Port reps, and several members of the community. It consisted of presentations on oil spill planning, preparedness, and response, to include notification requirements, first responder actions, and the use of an unmanned aerial system, drones basically, for situational awareness and validation of geographic response strategy within the area of the Crowley facility in Bethel. So those are all incredible improvements to our response capability and using technology to kind of move ourselves forward. We're really proud of that activity. In August, oil spill preparedness and response training for the public took place in Nome and was jointly coordinated again by Sector Anchorage, UAF, and the Alaska National Guard Bureau. And then in September, that same team went to Teller and met with village council members there and deployed that UAS, those unmanned automated airborne, I should say, systems to conduct shoreline and facility imaging and mapping there too. So again, another really good use of those unmanned aeronautical support systems. Just a credible way to use technology in a way that supports our direct mission. So with the understanding that vessel traffic in the Bering Strait is no longer decreasing, it is a long-term upward trend year over year. And that's going to increase the threat of these oil spills, right? So one priority that I've got for next year is to bring in an on-water oil spill response exercise to the region. Originally, we planned that for 2023 to follow up to our 2021 meeting in Anchorage with our Russian counterparts. That was meant to move forward what we call the Joint Contingency Plan with the Russian Marine Service. However, obviously the invasion of Ukraine has taken that sort of a cooperation off the table with Russia at the time. So we're going to move forward with the U.S. only exercise, and we're really looking forward to doing that with our own resources, sort of from our own standpoint, even without the Russian cooperation. So that will look like something like discussing waste stream management options so that we know what the challenges are to move large amounts of waste from an oil spill response cleanup, conducting an oil spill notification drill, following the same terms that were set up in the Joint Contingency Plan, some scenario that tests the Alaska Regional Response Team approval process for potential use of dispersants, and then exercising our on-water spill capabilities by bringing a Coast Guard cutter, maybe one of those Navy current buster skimmer systems, and potentially a new OSRO dispersant delivery aircraft, if we can get one, to test that capability suitable in the region as well. So what we hope to do there is really what we're hoping to accomplish is to bring together federal, state, tribal, and local responders and the stakeholders together to test all of our capabilities and identify shortfalls. So I know, Gay, you're on board to participate in that event, and I'm sure we can coordinate other stakeholder participation as well. Mr. Mark Everett from my staff will come to this forum next spring to talk further about this event and kind of explain it in more detail for those of you who have your interest piqued. Okay, and in conclusion, let me just say, and I'm very happy to take questions. I'm interested in your questions after this, but in conclusion, let me just say thank you for this opportunity on behalf of the Coast Guard to talk about what we're doing up here in the region. We've got a long tradition of providing services to the residents and waterway users in the Bering Strait region. And while particular missions and priorities rise and fall over the years, my personal opinion is I take the long view and feel that the foundation of service that we have to communities shapes what we do, and that'll never change. So, Gay, I'm happy to answer any questions or take any comments that we have from the group.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And I always say this when everybody's thinking of their questions, now is the time to give Rear Admiral Nathan Moore a little love in the chat box. It is not easy to be a straight science speaker, and we are really grateful that you were able to give us kind of that overview. And I think that the Bering Strait region really recognizes and appreciates, one, because of the longstanding history, but also because you guys keep coming. And unlike any of the other federal entities, they seem to be leaving the area and for the most part. And so you guys keep coming and you do such a great job. So that is great. We do have two callers on the line. So when we have callers, they have priority. So callers, I don't know where you're calling from, and you're going to have to unmute your phone, which I believe is, if you're not muted yourself, I think I can either hit a button or you can *6 and ask your question. I'm just saying at any time for the callers, you guys can unmute, or if there's a problem with unmuting, you can text my phone so get a pencil, at 907-434-1149, and I will I can relay questions too, because sometimes it gets gummed up. So any questions from callers? All right. So interrupt at any time. So for the rest of the group, we already have a question, the Gnome Nugget right off the bat. Peter, I'm not surprised. I have one question for now after the callers. Go for it. Start us off. And you are muted. Whose decision was it to cancel Russian participation in the oil spill exercises? That is the question from Peter Lowry.
Yeah, thanks, Peter, for the question. So the way that works, right, is part of the work that we've done over the years with this joint contingency plan as we moved our way closer to an on-water exercise. The next step was to do, as I mentioned, was in 2023 to actually get out on the water with them. Following the Ukraine invasion, right, from the administration, from the federal government of the United States, all of that sort of high level peer-to-peer conversation and interaction has been stopped, right? So we do not have any engagement at my level with my counterpart in Russia just based on their invasion of Ukraine. What we do have is the ability to speak to them for any emergent issues like a pollution response or a mass rescue. So we're able to work with them at the staff level to coordinate any neighbor boundary issues. What we're not able to do is coordinate conferences, meetings, any phone calls, that kind of thing, pleasantries with them. We are, just like the rest of the federal government is not, we are not doing that with the Russians. I hope that answers your question.
All right. Super fascinating. Thank you. I've been asking that since February. So he's been waiting and he's happy with the answer.
Hey, Peter, maybe I can speak to that a little bit better by saying this. We have a long-standing relationship with the Russian border guard. The Coast Guard does here in Alaska, and so that communication has been long-standing and very effective. That's how we manage potential fishing incursions along the maritime boundary line. It is how we've mentioned have worked out any particular oil spills or that sort of thing. So we were, as the Ukraine invasion happened, we were very specifically called out as an agency authorized to continue that interaction with them for emergent issues. So I was saying to Gabe before the call here that, Russia's our neighbor, right? And so we have to be able to talk to our neighbor when we need it, maybe not have them over for dinner all the time, maybe not have, maybe not have a lot of social engagement and pleasantries, but when there is an issue on the boundary, in our case, a maritime boundary of our two countries, we have to be able to talk to them. And that is what the Coast Guard is able to do, even post-Ukraine. That's Beverly Banner answer.
All right. And I have to say thank you for that, because regardless of, it's a political border through the strait in the ocean, and there's a lot of humanity on both sides of the strait. So we do share that waterway and kinship. Wes, I see your hand is up. What's your question?
Thank you for spending this time with us. I guess the first thing I was curious about, you'd mentioned that after Murbach, you did the inspections of fuel infrastructure within the region, and we saw a lot of pictures of damage of berms and houses and stuff. And I haven't heard anything about how well our fuel and that type of infrastructure held up through this. And so if you could give us a little update on that, that would be really cool. And so I don't forget, I do know that those inspections really helped because Crowley was needing to rush for some final deliveries to leave the region to start working south. So that was really helpful that it was timely inspections to get that infrastructure back up and running. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Wes, for the question. Yeah, and as I mentioned, that was really our immediate priority as the storm actually comes through and passes through is safety of life and search and rescue. And then we were able to very quickly kind of understand that there was not going to be a demand for our services for search and rescue, which is great, right? Honestly, that's a good thing. And then as we moved into looking at potential environmental response, that's when those inspections and overflights started to happen right away, looking for oil sheening and contacting all the local communities to determine, where we had issues. What we saw a lot of were smaller spills that were either light fuels, diesel or gasoline that does dissipate or evaporate quickly. Where there was some waste oil spills, some drums, that sort of thing that needed to be cleaned up and was addressed. There were damage to many of the old facilities, but none of them actually breached any open large containers, or I should say storage tanks, I guess. So we didn't have any massive spills from storage tanks. We did have a lot of damage to facilities that where the fuel and oil was spilled inside the containment area, right, in some level. So the containment systems worked. You might have seen some of the examples and pictures on the news where some of that secondary containment was damaged by the storm. So you didn't have a spill, but you also lost your secondary containment capability, which then had to be quickly replaced. Basically, have to have that earthwork replaced and containment area rebuilt. That's important in case you do have a spill. So I think it was a combination of having facilities that had the proper containment, also having a lot of facilities that did not actually rupture their large storage tanks. So we were very focused immediately with the state and the entire and FEMA and the entire team on facilitating refueling immediately. And you're exactly right. Motor Vessel Harris was up there, the tanker ready to offload as Murbach passed through, and so we needed to get that fuel, ashore and get folks refueled for the winter as quickly as possible. So that was a real priority for our team out of Anchorage, and I think they did a great job. So thanks.
All right, so I see your hand is up, Lucas. We did just get a text in from St. Michael's, and I'll do that. We'll do the caller and then you, Lucas. So the question is, Frank from St. Michael, how many tribal liaisons is there in the Bering Strait region with the Coast Guard?
Okay, well, that's the easiest question I'm going to get all day, because we have one tribal. I have one tribal liaison on the district staff, and he's on staff here with me in Juneau, but he covers down for me across the state. And the way that works is, his name is Rob Edwardson. If you have not heard of him, I would encourage anybody who would like to contact Rob. We'd be happy to give you his contact information. We can do that maybe afterwards if. Pass that to everybody afterwards as a follow-up. But the way we do that is with Rob, is he actually works with folks in Sector Anchorage, Sector Juneau, the air stations, the cutters that come up, the ships that come up. He works with them to train them in all of the tribal interaction and consultation and information that we work on across boundaries with tribal relations comes through Mr. Edwardson's desk. He also works directly with folks like AFN. He works with the tribal liaisons for Allcom. So he is the single point of contact, but he's got kind of a support team of stakeholders that help him out, if that makes any sense.
So Edward Robertson. So let me
Robert. It's Robert Edwardson.
Robert Edwardson. All right,
yeah.
And I think actually, perhaps because I have lost the contacts on my phone recently, which is awkward, maybe Scott McCann could put in the chat box Robert Edwardson's number, and I will text it back to the caller.
Yeah, perfect. That'd be great. Thanks.
All right,
Thanks.
wonderful. All right, Lucas, sorry to make you wait on that. Please go ahead.
Oh, this is Charlie Lean, and
Oh, hi, Charlie.
we're listening to you as the Port Commission here in Nome, and very much appreciate your talk. I was reflecting on the big disaster responses that I've participated in the past and in real life. I'm very glad that you plan to exercise a catastrophic incident, like a ship or a large airplane going down. one of my concerns is that, you know, the local people do their best when there's an emergency, and we would all muster to shelter and do whatever we could with the victims. But, you know, certainly we'd be dependent on outside help. But what's happened in the past when we had a 737 go down, or we had some larger airplane crashes, was that, you know, the local response was the first 3 hours, and then it, you know, eventually outside resources were able to come to bear. But it's I think in the exercises that I've participated with, you know, from Juneau and Anchorage, they kind of dismiss the local assets and the local participation, and, oh, we've got this covered, just do what we tell you. And in real life, what happens is people take it upon themselves and aren't even aware of the incident command structure. So I think that would be something to work into your drill. Well-intentioned bystanders that are right in the middle of it. So.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. I think you're right. When I took you know, we kind of ran through an out brief of the exercise, the mass rescue exercise that we did up in Utqiagvik earlier this summer. You know, there was a lot of community involvement, and we, you know, for example, you know, there's I can't remember exactly how many ambulances there are, but I think there was only a couple. I think there's 1 or 2 ambulances up there, and then there was part of the exercise where there were some vans that were used, right? And people from the community said, hey, this is what we would do, right? We would bring these vans in, and we would help move people as we needed to the airfield and back and forth. And so that was actually exercise play, right? They actually were part of the, you know, they actually did that as part of the walkthrough that was going on. So I hope we're getting smarter about that. I think you're exactly right. In this region, I mean, we know, right? In Alaska, we know in the coastal regions, in terms of our response, that, you know, there's not going to be a lot of help coming quickly. There just is no way to get it there, right? So we would definitely rely on sort of what we would call an all hands on deck approach. And the real key thing is for us to get, if we have the right points of contacts understood and connected, and we've practiced it occasionally, then at least we know how to get organized and start, right? So it's not mass hysteria. That's the danger that's what you don't want at the beginning of some kind of a response, right? Is everybody well-intentioned, but having a lot of counterproductive activity even, right? So, but I take your point. That's really helpful, Charlie. Thanks for bringing that up.
All right, thank you, Charlie. Any other questions for Rear Admiral Nathan Moore? I have one. That is, so we have master mariners in the Bering Strait region. You can take a Lund 90 miles into the Bering Sea to go hunt walrus and make it home. You're a master mariner, and that is something, honestly, and that's tip of the iceberg. But we are in this region not very familiar with aids to navigation, rules of the road, that sort of thing, because we've just never had that. And we've never had this kind of, this amount of ship traffic. Given that everyone's out on the road, out on the ocean, which is like the road around here, we know people that see submarine action occasionally, or we have vessels now like Pacific Cod boats on the US side that are not AIS, don't light up on AIS for us here. And we're learning about AIS, and we're using sort of the public AIS. And we have boats that don't show on AIS that are American, that are doing perfectly good fishing things. We also have, in the dark of winter now, large vessel traffic. So the point is, we're seeing all these things. We see nuclear icebreaker, the lights in January, in February. They're coming very, very close to, people live close to the border here. And so these vessels are coming down at speed. Your Polar Star had an interesting view of one, I think in 21, the Christophe de Margerie. does the Coast Guard want public reports of things that we are seeing? I mean, it may get annoying, I would imagine. I mean, if it's if it's Pacific cod vessels, you know, that sort of, you guys know who they are, and we wouldn't see them, but we might see their lights. And do you welcome calls from citizenry and residents and things like that on what are we seeing?
I tell you what, Gay, I think we would certainly if something's out of place, right? I mean, a big advantage that we have, I think, is that the Coast Guard is so connected with our communities. You know, we live in the communities. We don't live on big bases with gates behind them, right? We all live out in the communities, and we all have boats down at the marinas, and so I think, you know, short answer is if someone sees something out of place, I mean, certainly, you know, if we're talking about submarines or you know, something that just doesn't seem like it's, you know, operating in some place where it should be, I think a call to either the local Coast Guard official, you can call the district command centers, both at the sector in Anchorage, or you can call the command center down in Juneau. And
Okay.
that's actually really useful. And I'll be honest with you, I was having this conversation with one of my Navy counterparts, a Navy Admiral, and I actually told him, I said, you know, hey, people call us all the time and say that they've seen something, and sometimes it's nothing, and sometimes it's actually really helpful. And so from a search and rescue standpoint, from a sovereignty standpoint, yeah, I would say, I mean, you know, not the least of which some of these, we just got through talking about the two defectors that came ashore. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, we would rely on the community to help alert us to anything that we might need to take action on.
So for that, we would probably call Sector Anchorage. You guys have 24/7 phones, and also would we be calling the RCC, the Rescue Coordination Center?
That's
in
right. You
Nome,
can,
or
I mean, if you wanted to, if it's easiest, you can call the Sector Anchorage Command Center, or you can just call the District Command Center. That's the 907-463-2000. You can call
Okay.
that 24 hours a day. And,
yeah, they've been great. And
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
there are things we're seeing because we're not used to seeing ship lights at night. Now that it's
Mm.
getting dark, you know, normally vessel traffic would all be gone from the region. Not anymore. We had on the night of January 23rd, just picking a night out, when I looked at AIS, we had 8 vessels. The small one was 370 feet this January. You know, northbound, southbound, LNG tankers, 900 feet. We had an 800-foot, I don't know, nuclear container ship. I mean, it was like, holy cow, 8 doesn't sound like much, I'm sure, if you're in the Seattle, but for us, gee whiz, that was ice covered and everyone's coming and going. So these are new things for the region to see.
I think, you know, and I think what I would say is that the combination of anybody in the communities alerting us to something that they think is out of place, the combination of that and what we are doing in terms of you know, vessel traffic monitoring on AIS. We overfly the maritime boundary line with C-130s. We always have at least one cutter in the Bering Sea, including in the wintertime. So, you know, that you may not always see the Coast Guard from where you are, but we always have a presence. And I think the combination of our actions to understand what's out there with whatever information we get from the community is real powerful.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good partnership. Symbiosis.
Yeah, right.
So, all right, well, that's good to know. All right, we have a quiet audience. Peter Lowry, go ahead, Peter. I can't read totally your chat message, but I see you're wanting to ask a question. Wes, I see you too, but Peter, you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I was recording through the audio, so I had to unplug a bunch of mics. Sorry for the confusion. So I wanted to kind of build on the connection to the community and the communications that we would share with you. And I think both the community, I think the community as a whole is happy to share information, but I think we'd also like more information from the Coast Guard a lot of the time. Especially since Russia invaded Ukraine, I feel like, you know, at the very beginning of things, I asked a bunch of questions that no one in Alaska could answer, and was kind of constantly being referred to Washington, D.C. And so I think more communication between, bilateral, multilateral communication would be greatly appreciated. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on how maybe we could improve that. And then also, how can we in those situations hold the Coast Guard accountable when maybe we don't get those answers that we want, or we don't get maybe the presence we need, or so on and so forth. So broadly about increasing communication, but also holding each other accountable as part of that good relationship between community and Coast Guard.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Peter. So, I mean, I think what I would tell you is, the fact that we do have cutters in the Bering Sea all the time, and we are flying at any time we have a cutter in the Bering Sea, I should say, and we do have routine flights of the maritime boundary line from the C-130s, and during Arctic Shield in the summer, those aircraft that are in Kotzebue that fly the coastline. So we have a pretty steady presence of maritime domain awareness. I think from a law enforcement standpoint, when we're talking about interaction with whether it's the Russians, whether it's fisheries, if we're doing law enforcement boardings for fisheries enforcement, we intentionally don't advertise where we are and when we'll be there. That's from a law enforcement standpoint, that is counterproductive, right? You don't ever really want to do that. So what we will do though is we make our presence known when we are out there, right? So part of law enforcement is deterrence, and so by the cutter showing up and doing some boardings and being on scene, that is a deterrence factor for the rest of the fleet, that to ensure they're all operating on a level playing field and following the fishing regulations appropriately. Or if it's the maritime boundary line and we're patrolling that with the aircraft or the cutters, being very visible is part of that deterrence. So I guess my answer to the question would be, or answer to your question would be, you're not going to see us publish schedules of when we operate, because from a law enforcement standpoint, you can kind of understand how that would be inappropriate and actually would reduce our effectiveness. What I'm happy to talk about anytime is sort of the level of assets that we have, and in general terms, I can talk to you about how we operate. So in general terms, we do always have a major cutter operating in the Bering Sea, and that cutter patrols the boundary line. And in the summertime, we push that cutter up north the straits occasionally, depending on traffic and what we're interested in having them do. The C-130s out of Kodiak do routinely fly the Bering Sea, and when I say routinely, I'm talking about it's not every minute, every day, but it's more than once or twice a week. We're out there patrolling to make sure that we know what's coming in from long range over the MBL, and so we have the ability to surge and operate seasonally when we need to, when intelligence tells us there's potentially an increased threat coming, again, whether that's foreign fishing activity or law enforcement activity of our own. And so we're able to surge seasonally. So we can talk generally about those kind of things, Peter, but I mean, again, from a law enforcement standpoint, we will never be able to share with you exactly schedules and specifics on deployments for those reasons.
All right. Thank you very much. Wes, you had your hand up earlier, but it is down.
So I guess I just have a kind of, I don't know how well you'll be able to say, but with your increased activity, the Coast Guard's increased activities, what are some of the, unique things that you would say you found with that increased activity, you learned as a fleet, or things you saw that you don't think you would have with the, our former level of activity?
Well, I think I tell you what I would say, Wes, is what the increased activity to me means is more risk, right? There's just more risk of vessel collisions. Obviously, there's more risk of fire or groundings or those kind of things. So it sort of translates into more risk, is the way I think of it more directly. I think the other thing that we've seen, without exception, is our interaction along the maritime boundary line with the Russian fleet remains very professional. That is a very rules-based system that has been perfected over decades of enforcement on both sides. So we're very happy, frankly, to be honest with you, to see that rules-based order approach to the maritime boundary line continues, even post-Ukraine invasion. So that is something we're very happy to see happen here in the recent months since the invasion, or continue, I guess I should say. It's really just continued from where it was last year. And so I think it's risk. It's risk in terms of traffic, and then also just a real steady continuance of professional behavior. So that's kind of what the increased traffic has looked like to me.
All right. Thank you very much. Hope that answered
Thank
it
you.
for you, Wes. Yeah, okay. My question is, because when you had mentioned, panic being a bad thing, which it is, but one of the things that always seems to crop up is there's this thought that, the U.S. exclusive economic zone, otherwise known as the EEZ, is off limits to foreign vessels, and it is not. And so one of the things that has come up in the Bering Strait region is that might be good to clarify a little bit is, would it be illegal if we saw a Russian vessel, military vessel or whatever, traveling on the east side of Diomede, in between Wales and Diomede? And I know the answer to the question, but it might be helpful to let people know, because that is something that we're waiting for. But I think a lot of people might, because it hasn't happened, or it hasn't been happened in a long time, it might be shocking to people to know. So that might be good for you to say what the answer on that is.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Gay. You're obviously, I mean, we know that you're obviously very informed on all these topics. That's a really good question. That's a deep one, right? So you're absolutely correct. Of course, it is not illegal for vessels to operate in another country's EEZ, right? That area is not territorial waters. Territorial waters is 12 miles offshore, generally speaking. That's a different situation, and for military vessels, with the exception of a geographic strait, for example, the Bering Strait, or in this case, as you mentioned, the Diomedes. There is, through the International Maritime Organization, through the IMO, there are approved transit routes on both the west and eastern side of the Diomede Islands, right? So those transit routes are in place, agreed to by the United States, Russia. The International Maritime Organization approved those transit routes on both sides. So it is legal for military vessels to transit on the eastern side, north and south, and the western side, north and south. And so you are correct that we have not seen that. We have not seen that in recent years, at least not to my knowledge that I know of. We've seen it, but it could happen, and it would be legal. That's right.
Right. And so that would be part of that mitigating sort of that initial panic, the Russians are right out front, that kind of thing would be, they are not allowed. I know the strait is kind of tricky and I don't want to get into it, but they're not allowed. No foreign vessel is allowed. Is it within 3 miles, state waters, 12 miles territory?
Well, they have to
Without
stay in
State Department, without you guys sort of okaying that.
Right. I mean, they cannot approach shore and actually, land, right? They can't land ashore, but if they stay in the transit route, which is marked, right? It is marked on the chart. So then again, that's passage similar to what you see in other straits, in the Mediterranean and even in the Caribbean, the old Bahama Channel that runs up Cuba. I mean, there are marked routes that are approved for international transit, and that's exactly what the Bering Strait is there on both sides of the Diomede. So, we're working right now. It's actually interesting because the Coast Guard is working right now, and some of you have probably been involved in this through public comment periods on a port access route study for the Arctic. So when you get through the Bering Strait north, right, then coming around to the east, going towards the Northwest Passage, we are in the process of taking public comment and beginning to put together what we would propose as the United States' answer to a route, right, an access route that runs along the north shore of Alaska, connecting to the Northwest Passage route that Canada is coming up with. So that would be another example of a defined route on a chart that would be for large vessel traffic to provide a safe, sort of road for everybody to be on.
Well, thank you very much. And the question about how close they can come is because the Kashima, which is the Japanese training vessel, the Japanese Self-Defense Force training
Yeah,
vessel.
I think it's Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force. Yeah.
Well, we woke up in Nome and they were right there looking for some fuel. I mean, they were literally like a mile off, and they have a different kind of flag than the regular Japanese national flag of the red ball on the white background. And so it's a little bit more looking imperialistic, like the old flag. And they were flying that, and they were parked in front of Nome. And the first time they did that, there was a boy, did my phone light up. And there was a lot of questions, concerns. There was maybe not so much the communication. It was kind of a novel thing, and it made me want to know a little bit more about what is the process for foreign vessels, coming in. So thank you for describing that, what goes on in the strait proper, and
Right.
then we have some other little whoopsie doodles that occur where people are sort of surprised, because these are novel things to see military vessels. I think we had the Canadian Navy came in, and everyone they came into overnight a few years ago, and everyone was like, Canada has a Navy. We didn't even, it was sort of like, I'll be darned. But so those kind of things are novel, and we're all learning, but we haven't seen these kind of things very often. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Sorry, Canada. All right. We still have a caller, and feel free to jump in at any time or text. Other than that, any other questions for Rear Admiral Moore? All right. If you want to stay on a little bit after, just for a second, that would be great. And maybe Mr. McCann. With that, I guess we'll close. Remember to add some kudos for the Coast Guard here. Give some love to Juneau and Rear Admiral Nathan Moore for giving us this much time, this much of his time. And with
You're
that,
you're very welcome, Gay. You're very welcome. Hey, thanks everybody for giving me some time to explain what we do, and we're happy to take feedback and really, I am incredibly honored to be here and work with all the Coast Guard men and women that serve you here in Alaska. So thanks for the opportunity to talk.
all right. Thank you so much. And next Thursday, same bat time, same bat channel, 6:30. On Thursday, we're going to have Rick Toman. He's with UAF, Alaska Center for Climate Assessment and Policy. He is well known in the Bering Strait region, and he is going to talk about, he's also going to give us a review about the wild weather we have experienced in Western Alaska this year. He's going to review what's happened, including Murbach, as well as everything else that was going on this summer. And he is going to give us the brand new projections and models for late fall and winter 2023, how we may fare. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you next week, and have a great night, everyone. Thank you all for coming.